Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the United Stand. It's Adam Talks time. We have got so much to get through today. So much has happened today. Loads of stories on the financials, certain players, definitely David De Gea anyway, but always on Adam Talks, we've got a guest with us. Making his debut on the United Stand today is Mr. Chris Wheeler of the Daily Mail. Chris, absolute pleasure to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, Adam? Okay?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm really happy to get you on because you've been doing plenty of talking. You've been covering quite a lot. And obviously, we see you at the press conferences. We see you all over with Manchester United. You do cover the club in depth. There's been a lot going on at the moment. Obviously, hot topic is the takeover and everything like that. The financials been released, who we're buying, who's selling. You're covering all of that, and we'll talk about it all today. But we've got to start with the news that's come out today. David De Gea. It's been an ongoing saga. The truth behind it has been hard to dig out and sort of dissect from what everyone's reported. But as far as you're concerned, Chris, right now, where are we at with David De Gea? What's going on?
Well, as it came out about 10 days ago that David wasn't on the list, and that obviously kind of sparked some concern, some stories, some speculation. We said right then and there that the problem was that Erik ten Hag effectively wasn't having David. You know that a deal had been in place, that David had agreed to, obviously, to go and lower his wages, which were fairly high, at $375 a week. And the club seemed okay with that, and that looked like it was going to happen, and hence you had, for quite some time, a lot of optimism around the club and from the players' camp that things were going to get done. And then suddenly it kind of turned, and he wasn't on the list. And when we looked into this more deeply, it transpired that Erik ten Hag effectively had vetoed this contract going through. That I'm not sure if people know, but when the club sign a player, the club have a veto and the manager has a veto, and that sort of safeguards everybody. It means that the club don't sign a player that the manager doesn't want, and the manager can't foist his own players onto the club, and then when he leaves, suddenly they've got a whole squad full of players that they didn't really need. And so I don't know whether it's formally exactly that with the contracts, but certainly it seems to me as Erik ten Hag has effectively said, no, I'm not signing off on this. David has, the club has, Erik said no. And he clearly, I think, wants a goalkeeper who's better with his feet. I think you've seen for quite some time now the stories coming out about David where he wasn't going to be number one or guaranteed number one if he stayed. I think it's gone further than that now. I think Erik, maybe, I don't know whether the FA Cup final was the tipping point, but Erik's looked at it and thought, this isn't going to work, you know, that I need a goalkeeper that's more adapted to my system. And so rather than keeping David on a lower wage as pseudo number one maybe, and buying at £15 million, say, a number two who would push him more thoroughly than other players have, I think Erik at this stage now would rather that he left and a new number one came in. Obviously we've had Andre Onana has been mentioned, David Raya has been mentioned, but certainly a goalkeeper who's better with his feet. And Onana, of course, played under Erik at Ajax.
That's it. So for everyone to understand, we've all been looking into it. We've said there's a contract on the table there. We're waiting for David De Gea. This is like what's been going on, what's been circulating. That contract was the so-called, let's just say, the 200 grand that everyone was looking at. So it was like Marcus Rashford was being offered what David De Gea was going to get, and they swapped contracts essentially. That was like that was doing the round. So the 200 grand contract was the one that Erik ten Hag said no to. So really, the one that's on offer right now is one that's less than that. And is that where the issue is from De Gea's side?
I think, yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what the figures are on the second or the third contract, but I think the main game changer here has been Erik ten Hag. I think that he's turned around and said, look, whatever the money is, I want a different sort of keeper. And if we can keep De Gea on much lower wage, look, it's possible David De Gea could still stay, but I think he'd be staying, first of all, on even less money, and secondly, he'd be staying not as number one. That I think Erik ten Hag would look to bring in a first-choice goalkeeper, and I'm not sure David De Gea would have that. So I think certainly the mood at the club has changed dramatically from one of optimism to one of it's looking unlikely. Although what they are still saying today, it's worth pointing out, a lot of stock's been put on the fact that June the 30th, end of contract, he walks away as a free agent, the club are stressing, don't forget, we can still sign him after that. Yes. It's not as though the moment we strike midnight on Friday, he walks away and he can't turn around again. They can still sign him beyond that. So it's not as though June the 30th is as categorical and final as people might think it is.
Yeah, so as far as David De Gea is concerned, it is Ten Hag. He either got that message from the manager in just the way that everything's been done right now. He is going to be a number 2 next keeper. It'll be number 2 wages. It'll be number 2 in terms of what Ten Hag's plan is. He wants another goalkeeper to come in. That's a definite now. I think we can all see that. So David De Gea is having to sit down and go, I am the longest serving player at this club right now. I'm probably the most decorated within a Manchester United shirt, one with the club that's in the squad right now. And next season, I'm going to be at this club as a number 2 on less than half the money that I was on last year, or I move. And that's why we're having this sort of De Gea waiting to sort of see and find balance these options, really. That's where we're at.
And don't forget the Golden Glove winner as well. So it's not as though he's, people
Yeah.
talk about on the wane. I don't think, I absolutely know for a fact, David De Gea hasn't become a bad goalkeeper overnight. That's not the case. I think a little bit like Harry Maguire, 2 very good players who don't really fit into Ten Hag's system. And so as Harry's found out, I think also David now has discovered that if you don't quite fit in, then we've got a problem, And so I wouldn't say he's number 2 keeper, but I'd say he's not number 1, if that makes sense. I think Ten Hag would like to have a little bit, I don't know, going back in the day to is it Tim Howard and Roy Carroll, I can't remember now, and there were other, and then more recently there was talk of Dean Henderson coming in as an equal number 1, and 2 of them would kind of fight it out. So I think it would be not so much staying as number 2, but not as number 1, and there would be more of a kind of fair competition.
It all looks like from the outside, Chris, like it's a communication problem really within the club, and it highlights it a lot because you've got one story coming out and you've got this coming out right now. The club saying yes and Ten Hag saying no, that looks like a bit of a problem within. Hopefully they can get everything in order for when it really matters and we need to start bringing players and replacements in the summer. But have the club sort of messed this up again in a way, because you've got David De Gea there, and this is for the David De Gea fans essentially that I'm saying this, because he probably does deserve a little bit of a send-off. It's like, this looks like it's going to be one of the longest serving players we've had at the club, whether you like him or not. He's going to probably go out with a bit of a whimper here and not really getting a send-off that he probably, he really does deserve for his time here at the club. He has served the club well, and again, it just looks like Manchester United making a little bit of a pig's ear of things.
I think that's quite fair. I think it would be better if, as it does play out, that he doesn't stay. I think it would have been better for him to go with the Golden Glove Award and last season, ride out on a high.
It was perfect.
Irrespective of the cup final, didn't quite go his way, of course, didn't go the club's way. But that at least would have been the end of the season. He walks away with a trophy, a personal trophy, and that would be that. This now, I don't think there's a disconnect between Ten Hag and the club. But I don't think Ten Hag's the first coach to become frustrated at a lack of movement, at a lack of money, and not knowing quite where he stands. So he needs to maybe start pushing, and he feels that way. And so what you're seeing now is a bit of friction maybe, but it's not the first time it's happened. But certainly, I think from the De Gea point of view, this could have been sorted out earlier. It's rumbled on all season. It came to a head, I guess, in the FA Cup final. It's gone on since then, and there's definitely been a sea change within the club from optimism to pessimism.
Yeah, in terms of like this mess, Ten Hag pushing, there being a bit of a disconnect now. How much of this can we sort of put down to the disruption off the pitch with the takeover and everything like that? Because the Manchester United staff and the powers that be probably don't know where they stand in a lot of the takeover stuff. They're not probably being able to give Ten Hag the message that they want to, or with any authority. Is this, in your opinion, causing a bit of this problem right now, the uncertainty and the fact that could there have been a case of them not going in, not committing to any players with the financials and the release of the financials coming out just to make the books look good and make everything look kind of rosy there, because one purchase would have sent us back down into the red, basically.
Well, obviously it doesn't help I think at any club, certainly a club of this magnitude, uncertainty, insecurity, doubt never helps. Managers don't like it. Managers, never like this kind of thing, particularly going into a transfer window. What I would say, and it's my understanding, unless someone knows better out there, but the club say, and it came out again today with these third quarter financials, they say the money, the actual cash, is down to about 73 million, 0.7 million. But what they say is the money is there for transfers. The lower budget that Ten Hag has is down not to them not having the cash, it's down to the fact that their FFP restrictions mean that it can only be that high. So that tells me that even if Sheikh Jassim came in tomorrow and just put down a super bid and did the whole thing tomorrow and had pots of money, I don't think that changes the transfer budget in this window. Mm-hmm. I still think, because of FFP that's gone before, that's now guiding what they can and can't spend, I think Ten Hag's budget is about 120 and what he can raise from player sales, and we'll come back to that later. But I think the budget is the same irrespective of a takeover by Sheikh Jassim.
The proof and blueprint is there in pretty much the Newcastle model. Yeah. Mike Ashley left the club with zero debt. We don't get enough credit for that as an owner. So the ownership came in from Saudi. They can just work with a blank, clean slate, go on infrastructure, go and spend what they want in terms of building Newcastle up. But even them, they're looking at spending one player, but then turning down a James Maddison because he's too dear. So there is truth in that. These financial fair play rules are real this time. It is the second year of the new regulations coming in. I know the agents are going to be hampered by it later on this year as well. And it changes every year, doesn't it? It has to be a certain percentage. So United are ahead of it, and you can only praise them in a way for that. Yeah. Maybe another reason why the Glazers are jumping ship as well, because they're just being strangled completely, and they knew this was coming. But ultimately, people will look at, well, win the Champions League now, Chris, more revenue. The revenues from UEFA are going up in that. Surely there's a new sponsorship deal coming in as well. But ultimately, the debt has hampered us, and the money that you were talking about then isn't really our money. It's the revolving credit facility that's there. That's the money that's available. So it's the company credit card as such.
Exactly.
That's where the money is.
100%. And there's no one really should be questioning the Glazer ownership, and the debt on the club hasn't been a millstone around the club's neck for a long, long time now. Yes, they have invested money. Equally, people would say it's not their money. I get that completely, but I think where we are now, it's an FFP-driven thing, and hopefully where you will see an impact from a takeover is in the future, of course, where once that money comes in and the ownership model changes and sponsorships change, as you saw with Man City in Abu Dhabi, it wasn't necessarily just oil money overnight. They've also, to be fair to them, over time, they have completely changed the club. It is now self-financing, so it isn't just one Arab sheikh putting his hand in his pocket every single year and throwing money at it. They have changed the whole model, and that's what Man United need now. Not just some guy coming in with pots of money, but someone who can come in and transform the club financially and as a business model. Yeah,
that's it. And ultimately, every United fan's hoping that Ten Hag will stay, will hang around for this new ownership and structure to come in, because we can see the improvement that Ten Hag's made. We can see them brutal calls. I think it was Pep Guardiola was calling out Ten Hag to make this sort of call like he did in his early days as well, where it's like you've got a loved player in David De Gea there at the football club, and he's just gone, it's time. Yeah. Time to change it now. I think everyone can accept David De Gea has been a great servant, but Ten Hag has now seen it and gone, right, okay, I am not going to put my neck out on the line. I'm not going to threaten my reputation as a manager, because he probably sees himself as a possible elite manager in time. That's why he's gone to Manchester United. He isn't going to risk it anymore. He said no, and I think it's probably the right time to do it with that new ownership coming in. Like he's saying, this is how I need to work. And new ownership coming in will obviously, hopefully, working alongside that. And I hate to say it, and I say it nearly every single video, because it's like the blueprint is just down the road. If you put a structure in above the right manager, you basically got a recipe for success, haven't you? And it's just horrible for United fans to see how well that lot are doing. And United are struggling with this uncertainty and what looks like pure confusion behind the scenes right now.
It's so well run, sadly. It's unbelievably well run, and you can see square pegs in square holes. You see how good it is. This summer, even now, no sooner has Gundogan gone than Kovacic comes in. Square peg in a square hole. What concerns me about Manchester United right now is they've gone for Mason Mount. Great, if that's what you want, if that's the kind of player that you want, it surprised me a little bit.
Can you just get, in your opinion on that, because we'll get into the transfers and the ins and outs now, do you think Mason Mount is a #1 target for Ten Hag? Can you see that? Above every other midfielder that's out there now?
It surprised me, but what concerns me, Adam, is the fact that he went for Mason Mount. He is still going for Mason Mount. That came to a bit of a dead end. The offer's on the table still. That one's not done yet. But what concerns me is having not got Mason Mount, he's then, or not he, but the club have changed their attention to someone like Caicedo. So they changed their attention to someone like Rabiot, who's now signed at Juve again. But what concerns me there is Mount is a very different player to Caicedo. Mount's a very different player to Rabiot. And then what concerns me then is what do you actually want? Do you actually know what you want? Because City lose Gundogan, get in Kovacic, done, bang, finished. No messing about, no back and forth.
It's like they knew it was happening 4 months ago.
They do business and they get things done. Man United, they've gone for Mount, fine if that's what you want, but then having not got Mount, the next targets don't quite tally with Mason Mount. So it's, do you actually know what you want?
Yeah, I mean, you watched United towards the end of the season like us. To me, it looked like Christian Eriksen was waning. It looked like he was blowing a bit towards the back end of the season. I looked at it and went, Mount, Eriksen, that's an automatic replacement there. I would think Mount would start ahead of Eriksen as well. When 30 gives Erik Ten Hag more, it gives him that energy, sort of that Fred mentality with the energy, but the better quality on the ball. So I can see how that works. But I mean, it's a concern for me. I mean, not many people rate Rabiot, like you just said then, but for United to be so confident in letting someone like Rabiot go, when we was all for getting Eriksen in as like our second signing of the summer because he's a quality player and it's free and it sort of safeguards any mishaps later on in the window. For Rabiot just to go and sign a new deal at Juventus, it worries me a bit. The club must feel confident in getting Ten Hag his target if they're going to let deals like that just walk away or slip by. I mean, you can say we were in for him. I know we was because last summer we seen Murto, we seen the pictures, tail between his legs, put in his place by Rabiot's mum. But ultimately, it scares me as a fan that we haven't got any backup plan at all. It's like, it's Mount or nothing right now. That's how I'm looking at it. Is there any truth in it? Can you read it that way? I
mean, in terms of timing, I'm quite relaxed. I think, it's only been 2 weeks of this window. We've got 2 months left. So timing-wise, it's not drastic. You'd obviously rather have targets in early, gives them a chance to go and integrate. And that makes far more sense. So the timing of it doesn't bother me too much. I think what concerns me, as I say, when you compare to City and other clubs who've done business quite quickly and quite decisively, what concerns me is the lack of direction and the lack of clarity about what you actually want. It's fine saying we want a striker, great. We want a goalkeeper, we want a midfielder. But midfielder, I think even more so in the game these days, covers a whole range of different kinds of players. As I mentioned before, Mount compared to Rabiot, very, very different. So where's the thinking there? In terms of Eriksen, I think maybe he came back too quickly from his ankle injury. I think maybe, what we saw at the end of the season was a guy who was very keen to get back, obviously. Great player, great guy. Came back and I think towards the end there, he was, like you say, blowing a bit. That he, at his age, having been what he's been through, of course, to get that injury that ruled him out for about 2-3 months, and he came back, I think that was the effects of that. So how they fit, Eriksen and a Mount, whether it's Mount or someone like Mount, Eriksen and Mount and Bruno, obviously you've got Casemiro, but you're prepared to let Fred go and possibly McTominay too. It's like, so where's the clarity? Where's the thinking here? What are you actually going to do? How will it look next season?
Yeah, it takes us and brings us on to the next bit in terms of outgoings. But within them outgoings, it's United trying to be clever in the in the transfer window this summer and just make deals where they can, use players that they've got at their disposal. I just want to see, from your opinion, and a lot of people would want to know in the chat as well, was there any truth in us even attempting to go in for Declan Rice? Was there a player swap even on the cards there? Could we make that deal happen?
I think a club like United have to be in for Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham. I think it would be...
We're nowhere near Jude, was we?
Well, but you have to be in it. You know, I think you have to give it a go. Obviously, we tried under Ole a couple of years ago. Got him down to Carrington with his folks and tried to go and wow him. Didn't quite work. I think, you know, I think that a club of this size needs to be in for these players, even when it doesn't look likely. And it was never likely on Jude Bellingham, to be fair, and didn't happen. And equally, I'd be amazed if Declan Rice was to come to Man United. And to be totally brutal, why would he? You know, at this moment in time, why would you? You know, it's if Man City are in for you after what happened last season, you know, it's a very harsh reality. But why would you go for the other side of town right now? It just, you know, wouldn't do it.
It does. Look, the more you look at it and the more that budget comes out, it looks like it's going to be one midfielder, possibly one forward, the goalkeeper, like we've discussed, obviously. But it is a bit worrying. I'm not going to lie, as a United fan myself, and everyone who talks to me and comes on the show all say the same thing. It's like, I actually now think we might not get the amount of players that we need. Never mind the quality players. It's like people are looking at Mount as an underwhelming signing. In fact, it's like, but at the end of the day, we've got to trust in Ten Hag. The signings he made last summer made a massive difference, taking us from where he was the season before to third and a trophy. I think we've just seen a taste of what is possible with Ten Hag and probably want more. I think everyone would have accepted fourth and nothing at the start of the season. But third, a trophy and another final, how Ten Hag has changed the team, the impact his players he's brought in have made, I think everyone's just gone, oh, maybe we can get more. And we got a little bit ahead of ourselves. I think Ten Hag personally is ahead of time from what we were dealing with last season with this team. But yeah, a super chat in from Darren Mulaney says, is a number 6 we need in midfield where people like Caicedo and Anna from Everton play. It's again, it's players that, I mean, Onana for Everton, Mason Mount, I wouldn't say they are sort of like headline makers in terms of signings. To make them headline signings, like you said, United have to be in for this player, that player. We need to clearly sell players, which brings us on to your exclusive hit list of players that is United's way of actually bringing Ten Hag's targets. The players on that list, I think everyone can agree with, have underperformed or not really offered much to Manchester United. You've got the obvious ones, but the big names, Scott McTominay, Harry Maguire, possible suitors for them. Any word? I know they are on the list for the club and looking for the best value, but who is going to buy them players? That's the question. With them big wages, like the chat's saying there, who is going to offer that wage for that player?
That is the big question. I think it's clear to everybody that Harry Maguire needs to move on. I think he's a great player. I think he's a great guy. England regular, let's not forget this. You know, like David De Gea, he hasn't gone bad overnight. But I think he's also a player who, it's quite clear, doesn't fit into Ten Hag's plans. And it's for the best for Ten Hag, for the club, for Harry, that he finds somewhere else. And I think even Gareth Southgate's been quite clear about this, that he can't continue picking him for England automatically if he's not playing for Man United. I think it was 8 Premier League starts last season, which is ridiculous. But like you say, the problem is when you sign a player for 80 million and you give him a contract of 190 a week, when it's time to go, what do you do? And that's a problem now. And I think there is an acceptance at the club that they would have to give a substantial payoff. You know, that I mean, the figure that I reported was £10 million, and that I'm told is accurate. You know that. So I think where we are now is they feel that they've had their money out of Harry Maguire. They paid 80 for him. He's played 4 of the 6 years that he signed on for. So they've now been looking for between 30 and 40 million pounds for him. The problem is that I think they know and he knows that wherever he goes next will not match the 190. It can be more like £100,000. So there's 2 years worth of 90 grand a week that's outstanding. So they would need to effectively pay him up to the tune of about £10 million. So any transfer fee you get for Harry Maguire, you can knock off 10 million because that's what you have to go and pay him to go. So I think Harry, the problem will be finding a club. I think his stock has obviously dropped because of what's happened over the past couple of years. But I think people shouldn't forget, you know, he's an England regular centre-back, he is still a good defender. He's obviously had his confidence knocked. But I think unlike certain players we can talk about, who've now left the club, he got his head down. He's not moaned once. He's done his job. He's come on when needed. He's not been a moment's trouble. I think people should, have a lot of respect for that, And I think, but I still think it's best that he moves on if this is the big if, they can find a club. And I think you'd be looking at that kind of middle market, your kind of Evertons, your Villas, or maybe a foreign move. But I think it's clear another season of Harry on the bench looking very awkward. The whole thing's awkward. It's awkward for Eric, it's awkward for Harry, and it's time to move on.
Yeah, just to clear that up in terms of the club and how they look at it, for people in the chat to understand, people say, look at the loss you're making on Harry Maguire. The club don't, as a business, look at it that way. It's how they've seen out how many years they've had the contract, and then get a fee if you can at the end of that contract. That's how the club runs it, isn't it? Yeah,
there's this very unsexy word called amortisation, and you'll see it a lot on the financials and all the rest of it. And what that means is, if Harry Maguire, as he did, sign a 6-year contract, they extrapolate the fee over the course of that contract. And what they would argue, the club, would be they've had 4 good years, or some would say 2 good years and then 2 more out of Harry Maguire. So they've had a chunk of their money's worth. And what's outstanding now with him at 29, turning 30 very shortly, what's his situation now is that he's got, I think, 2 years left of that contract. And so therefore, that's all factors in his age, the length of contract, his current value, and of course his form, all factor into what's he worth on the market right now. Like anything, it's just like horse trading, really. I mean, it's pieces of meat. It's a second-hand car sale. It's what's the mileage on it, what conditions it's in, and what's the MOT, and that's what it's worth. And they would estimate Harry Maguire is currently worth between 30 and 40 million pounds.
30 and 40 million, yeah, I think that's fair, but take 10 off because United are going to have to subsidise that wage. That's what you're saying, basically. Yeah,
and personally, I think they'll ask 40, but I think 30 is the expectation. I mean, that's the top end, minus your 10 for the wages. So you could effectively be kissing goodbye to Harry Maguire for 20 million pounds, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what goes and what's important, because that's what money goes into the coffers for United to actually spend on another player. Yeah. SK Super Chat says Caicedo makes more sense than Mounts. Cover for Casemiro on plays at the progressive 8 role 2. We have options like Graven Birch. We could do if competent. If competent, yes. That's how a lot of United fans see United in the transfer market. I'm sure you've had a lot of people message you about things like that. But I'm going to go through some of that other list that you talked about there in terms of like suitors and possible ways of making money. The link with Fred to Fulham. You mentioned Fred and McTominay. Obviously, we're not sure of McTominay, possibly Newcastle, but there is apparently clear interest from Fulham for Fred. Is there any sort of update or truth in that rumour with him?
Yeah, and I think also you have to bear in mind, people say, well, the whole McFred thing, why is McTominay 40 and why is Fred 20? And again, I think that could end up being done around about 10 or 10 plus add-ons. Fred's going into the final year of his contract, so that's a major factor with him. And I think probably they are more inclined to listen to offers for Fred than they are to listen to offers for Scott. So I think I'd be surprised if Fred's still there come the start of the season, or certainly by the end of the transfer window. Scott is an interesting one because being the club it is, it puts a lot of stock by its young players. And it's not a club that likes getting rid of young players. You'll see from the deal for Iqbal, for instance, that there is a buyback option.
Yeah, break down that, because there's a lot more detail behind the 850,000, isn't there? If you just break that down on top as well.
Yeah, it's like €1 million, £850,000, like you say, but a lot of add-ons in what he can go and achieve. But I think crucially, there's the buyback option and a sell-on clause too. But it's the buyback option that's interesting because, as I say, it's not a club that likes to get rid of youngsters. Obviously, it's a club that offers its youngsters a pathway into the first team, a huge history of doing that. It's not in the club's DNA or its culture to get rid of young players. But I think equally, as you've seen, with other clubs, that they also realise if you're going to try and monetarise the club and the academy, that you are going to have to let young players go. You can't just stockpile them and have them sat there And you've seen quite a few young players go now, and it's possible, as you say, that Hannibal could follow. He's been linked with, I believe, Dortmund, about £13 million. But yeah, I mean, I think you will maybe see a slight change of trend with the club now, that they will try and monetize their academy players a little bit more, but also include buyback options.
That's it. It's like a bit of a posh loan.
A posh loan, a bit of an insurance policy, yeah.
yeah.
Posh loan.
When you look at it, it's like just under $1 million for Zidane. And then we have like that option to bring him back in. It's like you're not letting a player go for nothing. You have got a little bit in there, a little bit of money in there for him, and you could make that even more. For like, could you see a similar deal with Hannibal with Dortmund? Could you see something similar to that, but obviously a bit more money? Possibly,
absolutely. And no club likes to look stupid. No club likes to get rid of a player and then see him like flourish somewhere else. It makes the club look bad. And of course, dare I say it, this is part of the problem with the whole Mason Greenwood dilemma, is that not only have you got the various issues that we probably can't go into right now about Mason and where they stand, but underpinning all of that is can you as a football club literally just let go what could be a generational talent who could go on and become a £200 million player somewhere else? It's no club likes to let talent go in the fear that it might come back and bite them in the backside, and all of these deals can.
That's it. I'm just reading through another super chat there. Lil says, "Hi Adam, is there any info on how much the Dan Iqbal buyback clause is?" It's a question to you probably, Chris.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I just know that
it'd be a percentage.
Exists. I don't know whether I'd have thought it'll be a hard figure. I mean, so the sell-on clause will be a percentage, yes, but the buyback, I think, will be a hard and fast fee, and that's what you do. And to go back to one of the earlier questions, I actually quite agree that kind of an 8 or a 6 is what they need. I think they need someone to play next to a Casemiro. I think they've got enough options if they can get a centre forward in. I think they've got enough options across that if he stays on a 4-2-3-1. That front three, I think there are players there that you don't necessarily need Mount as much as you need someone, a really dynamic kind of, like you say, 6 or an 8 to go and drive things from deep. I think that would make, for me, more sense.
Realistically, looking at Fred being the one of the two, but if an offer came in for Scott McTominay, do you think the club would just take that if it was a decent offer and get rid of both Fred and McTominay, or do you feel they needed to keep one?
No, I think one might stay, and if that was the one, I think Scott would be favourite. But I think, from the club's point of view, as I said, it's a little bit sensitive because they don't like moving young talent that's come through and done so well.
Even with, sorry, just to cut you off there, but the way we're talking about the books and then the 100% profit for homegrown talent, could that tempt them into doing that?
That's the thing. So I think it's quite sensitive, but Scott would go for more money because of FFP.
Yeah.
I think also, though, there is a feeling within the club that they would never force him out. That's the last thing they want to be doing. I think their feeling is that they would, if Scott says, look, I've not played that much, I fancy a fresh start, they would be more than open to it. Equally, they will not push him out, and if he stays, they're happy with that.
Yeah, another super chat in. We need to start looking at the so-called prospective stars and not the so-called current stars. I'm sticking to my guns. United makes stars. We have a manager to do that now. The recipe for me is hard-working players. Mason Mount, maybe. It's like, I agree with that. I've always said that Manchester United made their superstars. They were made at the club. We never really had a success of bringing in these so-called Galacticos. It never seemed to work for Manchester United.
Not last 10 years, certainly.
Definitely not. But Scott, Fred, there is another midfield there. The forgotten man, Donny van der Beek. I haven't got a clue, mate. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with him. If he's on the list, obviously, if the right price comes in. But again, I'm looking at wages. I'm looking at the man who's hardly played a game in 2 years. He's wasted 2 years of his career, pretty much. It's a tough one to call again for Donny. But again, another player in a position, probably in the way of a progressive youngster coming through or a possible signing.
Yeah, again, I think he has to go. I think he should have gone. Was it a year ago, 2 years ago, when the Everton deal was done?
Yeah.
For some reason, Man United blocked it. There was a little bit of bad blood between Man United and Everton, going back to Tom Cleverley, which was bizarre. But basically, that was the backstory to it. Donny should have gone then, and it got blocked. and he stays. No one quite knows why. He doesn't know why, and it hasn't improved. And I think now, having got over the injury, I think he has to be moving on. I think, as per the story on Monday, I think there is a list of players they're actively looking to sell of about, I think it's about 8 players. And then there were the 5. There were the 5, which would be Harry, it would be Scott, Jadon Sancho, Anthony Martial and Dean Henderson, that they are absolutely open to keeping in the right circumstances. And I think even then, I think Martial and Sancho are separate again from that, in the sense that they are players that they really don't want to sell, but they would look at if the right offer came in. So I think you've got the 8, and that with players, you know, as I said before, like Donny van der Beek, you know, like your Freds, like I can't remember what the list is now. It was quite long.
Yeah, it was a very, very long one.
But it was all
team.
your.
It's a full team.
it was pretty much a kind of full team of players. You know that you've got Hannibal, you've got Zidane, Iqbal, you had Donny van der Beek, you had what else was there now? Fred. And a couple more there. I'm trying to think who.
Martial, Sancho, Maguire.
Yeah, the kind of 5, if you want to call sexy ones, are.
And Henderson, obviously.
Yeah, Henderson, Sancho, Maguire, Martial. You know, they're the ones that the club would consider, but are not shoving out the door. And Scott, sorry, was the 5th of those 5.
Yeah. Diego says, why is the club pushing for these midfielders when we literally have no number 9? We're going to talk about the striking options in a minute, but just need to get through it. A couple more names mentioned there. Obviously, the midfielders, we talked about Donny, Scott, Fred, Dean Henderson. This looks like an easy one to everyone from the outside. We've got a club there in Nottingham Forest which adore him. He's done well for. We can surely make this deal happen. Is there any updates on that? We're hearing it broke down, we're hearing it's back on again. And then we've got the unrest with how much we can spend at the club. And there's a keeper there that could actually just come back in. I know no one's going to like that in the chat because of Dean Henderson and all the rumours going on. But Dean Henderson, is there any updates, Chris?
I mean, the way I heard it was the deal to Forest is pretty much done, and the moment De Gea signed the contract, which at the time was expected, then Dean was off.
Has De Gea scuppered this now?
Well,
has this put a spanner in the works?
That's the problem, is the De Gea twist has sort of put it on hold. I would still expect Dean Henderson to go to Nottingham Forest for about £15 million plus add-ons. I think that deal's in place. I don't think he wants that to change. I don't think the club is unhappy about it. I think that's okay. But I think common sense will prevail here. And while David De Gea is still in flux and that whole thing hasn't been sorted out, it would be irresponsible to just sell a ex-England keeper off to a different club. But I think when you look at the interview that Dean Henderson did when he first joined
That's
Forest,
what everyone goes back to.
On loan, silly. And then it sort of played to the idea that he was a guy with maybe more confidence than like talent. You know, that the idea he had of himself or the image of himself, but wasn't quite what other people saw. He did this interview. Of course, he refused to come back. He turned down the chance to come back when Dubravka went back to Newcastle last season. So again, hardly showing that he was up for it. Wants to be number 1. Like, fair play to the guy. He's backing himself. He wants to be number 1, and he clearly sees his future away from Man United. He's happy going to Nottingham Forest. I think that will happen, but I think the De Gea thing has kind of just put it on hold for a little while. But I think he will go to Forest. And I think Man United will probably lose De Gea and they'll end up getting a brand new goalkeeper.
Andre Onana, talk of the town. That looks like the one that's more likely.
Yeah, there was talk today of a bid of £50 million going in.
Where's that money coming from?
Exactly. This is the problem. This is the problem now. It's not a bottomless pit anymore. And I'm told that's premature. But equally, the club are not knocking down the interest in him. And I think you've already seen with Erik ten Hag the fact he likes working with players that either he's worked with before or that he knows well from Holland. He's obviously worked with Andre Onana. He's worked with him at Ajax. He knows what he can do. He's his kind of keeper. And clearly that's one that could progress as and when the De Gea situation gets sorted out.
Do you feel like the De Gea situation will be sorted within the next week?
I don't think there's any mileage from either point of view. From I think once you go beyond June the 30th and he becomes a free agent, to then chase after him and say, oh, by the way, have a contract, it would just be weird. I just think if you're going to do it, do it. I mean, I think as it is, it's gone on long enough. I think it needs sorting out before June the 30th. I suspect that he will, if Eric is the problem, or not the problem, but the obstacle, I can't see that changing by Friday. So that's why I think David De Gea will leave. And certainly I don't see any merit in the club allowing that to drift beyond June the 30th and then pursuing it. That just seems odd.
Hot topic. Area we know we failed last season, Chris, striker. Number 9. We know United need one. We talked about possibles. First of all, I'm just going to take it off the table, or you can if you want. Is there any way that Harry Kane makes it to United from where we're at now? Is it just done, dusted? Could we see a U-turn at any point from Levy? Obviously, we're hearing Bayern Munich have put a bid in today for him. Should United be doing the same? Or is it a case of what we've just said in terms of the whole finance and everything like that? It just never was possible and it was never a story.
No, it's possible. It still is possible. If you'd asked me yesterday, I'd have been more hopeful. Less today because of this interest with Bayern Munich. I think it's absolutely true that Harry wants to join the club. The club, like Harry Maguire, would love to sign him. I think Eric wants a striker that can come in and knows the league and can just be scoring goals from day one. Who wouldn't want that, you know? The problem, as you say, is Daniel Levy and the money. And I think the moment he said £100 million for a guy who turns 30 next month, final year of his contract, a bit like Mason Mount, why would you? You know, who in this country, certainly, apart from Chelsea maybe, goes out and pays £100 million for a guy who's got 1 year left, who's 30 next month, who's got 34-year-old's ankles? You know, I mean, it makes no sense. So I think very quickly, I think Man United were out, said, right, no, at that price, we aren't even talking. If Levy will come down to near 80, I think it gets interesting. I think at that point, Man United wants him, Kane wants to come, Daniel Levy will accept that, then I think 80 is in the realms. That's not impossible. 100, it's not. The Bayern thing is a bit of a game changer because they've come in and they said, right, we'll give you 70 plus add-ons. And I think before this, Daniel Levy was faced with a real dilemma. Do I say no and lose 80 million quid on a guy who will leave for free next year? Now it's a bit different. Now he can, if this is true about Bayern Munich, and it seems that it is, I can get my 70 million for him. I'm only losing £10 million, but I'm not selling to a rival and I'm not backing down. So yes, I think as it stands, I think that Man United are out for Harry Kane. It's off the table. But it would only take Daniel Levy to lower his price to 80 million for that to be on again. The problem is with Bayern Munich offering 70, I'm not sure Daniel Levy will now do that.
That's it, leading us to then, like the chat said before, the potential sort of signing, the Rasmus Højlund sort of signing. That has been talked about, obviously, a United fan said he wants to go to Manchester United. We're hearing lots of stories that this deal is there whenever United want to make it happen. Are we on the right line now with that? Is this going to happen? Is this a possible signing for Manchester United? Is it more than likely going to be the only forward that we sign this summer now?
Yeah, I think absolutely the interest is obvious, it's clear, that's not been knocked down. There was clear interest in him. But you're looking at a very different deal to Harry Kane. You're looking at a guy who's, is he 20 or early 20s, is that right? 14 goals in Serie A for last season for Atalanta. No guarantee whatsoever he can come into the Premier League and begin scoring goals. So those are the two different sides of the coin from the club's point of view. Do you pay 100 million, which they're not going to, for Harry Kane and get a guaranteed Premier League striker? Or do you go the cheaper route and go for a Højlund who is untried, untested and offers no guarantees? The problem there was that very quickly Atalanta began asking for £86 million. And I think Man United were looking more in the kind of 30s. If they could do a midfielder for more money, but get in Højlund in the 30s. The moment Højlund was 86, he became as unattainable as Kane at 100.
Yeah.
The argument was, if we're going to pay 86 for Højlund, bang on 14 and get Harry Kane. So I think Højlund at 86 is a complete non-starter. Equally, there's interest in him and Kane. It's just, what's the price going to be? Osimhen is at 120, so I think that's a complete non-starter. And Napoli, the owner there is as bad as Daniel Levy in terms of hard to go and deal with. De Laurentiis. So, unfortunately, it's a fact of life that the guys that cost the most money are the goal scorers. They're the ones that earn the big bucks. They're the ones that cost the most money. It's very hard to get a striker cheap, and when they went looking in January, they got a loan option, and that worked out so. But if you're going to get a long-term number 9 centre forward for Manchester United, you've got to spend big money, and that's looking like being the biggest deal of the summer from the club's point of view. Will be who they get and at what price.
You had the official/unofficial list from the club in terms of players that could go out. Mm-hmm. We're talking about strikers here, and I'm off my top of my head, I'm struggling to think of one to come in. Is there a list of players that Manchester United are looking at that you know about? Is there another striker option that we could be going for?
Yeah, I mean, the club always work to lists. That's part of their job. They have a whole department who that's their job is to draw up lists in terms of 1, 2, 3 options. That's been going on for quite some time. So they will have other targets in mind. The guy at Benfica, Ramos, has been mentioned. We know for a fact that Erik ten Hag is a big admirer of him. Again, you're talking £60 million, so he won't come cheap. And it's a fact, it's a simple fact. If you want a top world-class striker, he will not come cheap, and unless you can do some fantastic deal or you've got a free agent coming in, you're going to be paying big money for a top striker. And I don't see an easy way around this. I don't see, unless they can pull a rabbit out of the hat, I don't see an easy way of signing a world-class striker on a long-term contract for a low fee. It's not going to happen.
Ultimately, no one around European football, world football, is going to want to help Manchester United. No. Obviously, they want to take down as many big guns as possible, so we're not going to get any helping hands here. It does look like there's going to have to be significant sales. We talked about the numbers there, 15, 20 millions for players, full internationals. It doesn't look like we've got any money anywhere. I think the only one player we haven't spoke about in depth is Jadon Sancho. He's like this myth, one of the highest earners at the football club right now. In fact, up until the point Marcus Rashford signs his new deal, by all accounts, is now the highest earning player at Manchester United, and probably one of the biggest disappointments coming from a fan side. I know he's been through a lot off the pitch this summer, but is there any way you can see him turning it around for Manchester United from what you've seen? You go to every single game, Chris. Or is this a player now that United have to look at and go, right, he's at that age now, he's shown signs since he's come back. Is this where we try and make weight a deal? Is this how we try and actually counter the fact that we haven't got a lot of money to spend this summer?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to be positive about Jadon Sancho right now. I think when you look at, when you Marcus Rashford or Bruno, or when you look at highlight reels of Jadon Sancho, it's hard to think of too many. You can do it on one hand almost in terms of great moments that he's had whilst at the club. But when you're as good as he is, and there's no doubting he's got the talent, and he's time's on his side, there's no doubting that he can turn it around. I think it's still possible, and Ten Hag's track record so far has been very, very good. You look at what he's done with other young players. Look at Marcus Rashford. I would not rule out Erik ten Hag having a huge effect on Jadon Sancho in terms of turning things around still. From where we are right now, as I mentioned before, Sancho was a name on that list that I think surprised me and other people. But I think to stress again, it's not a case of Jadon Sancho is for sale. It's more a case of, if in the current financial climate, if the right offer came in, they would look at it. I would still expect Jadon Sancho to be at the club this season, next season, whatever you want to call it. But I think it's a huge season for him. I think this next season he needs to produce the form that made Man United pay £73 million for him. Like you say, huge contract, great expectations. It was a two-year pursuit, you know. So obviously they really went out for him, and he's not really done what they were hoping for. I think from his point of view, he came into a situation a bit like Rashford coming back from the Euros. It was quite toxic. I think what happened the season before last, it got very messy behind the scenes. I think there was cliques and there was all sorts of infighting. I think Sancho struggled coming into a club that was in that kind of state. So if we can give him that, you know, for what happened last season, all right. But he needs now to produce this coming season to justify the expectations in him and all the investment.
A lot of fans are asking questions there. It's like, why can't we do what Chelsea have done? Why can't we be clever with loans, with options to buy? João Felix, for instance, players like this. Why do United just seem to operate different to every other club around? I mean, I don't know how Chelsea are doing it. They're obviously doing these long-term contracts and stuff like that. Is that just something that United just wouldn't go near? I think I've asked this question before, and no one's really ever had an answer to it. It's just like we just do business in our own way, and I think everyone is just getting frustrated that other clubs are finding a way and we're not, and we're talking about these big revenues all the time, but we still can't get the players that Ten Hag wants.
Well, for a start, I wouldn't call Chelsea clever. I think they've been an absolute basket case of a club for the past, you know, like few months since Todd Bowley
Quick
came
fix
in.
FC.
I mean, it's been off the scale. I mean, it's been ridiculous. What's happening now with Saudi is an interesting one. You know, I mean, with the Saudi influence over Clear Lake and the company that owns Chelsea, whether that needs looking at, I don't know. I know that Gary Neville's had his say about that. You know, and clearly, you know, there were some concerns there. But if it's all okay, fine. But I don't think Chelsea have been smart. I think if you're going to look at well-run clubs, unfortunately, as we talked about earlier, look down the road, look at Man City. I mean, look at that's a club. I mean, people talk about Abu Dhabi and the money, but I mean, Akanji and Ake and people, you know, even Alvarez, you know, great signings have come in, made an immediate impact. And I know it's galling for Man United fans, but that is the model of a well-run club right now. In Man United's terms, I completely understand what you're saying, and the fans too. I think the track record has never been great in terms of we always pay a premium to get a player. We invariably sell under value. We always seem to kind of lose out when we go and sell. And that was the case even when it was Ferguson and Gill. Ferguson admitted, he always said, you know, Alex, he always said that we paid the extra for their like silence, you know, so that other clubs don't leak it. And back then, deals got done very quickly. They rarely got out until right at the end. And if we paid a bit more, so be it. It feels that the last 10 years we've been paying more for the wrong kind of players. It's gone back and forth. There's been too many sagas, too many Sancho summers where we've gone back and forth, and which is great for the journalists, it's great for the reporters, it's great for the websites and the hits, for all the kind of this speculation and what have you. But it's not decisive good business. It drags on and it gets a bit messy, and we're in danger going down that route with Mount, and goodness knows after Mount, if he indeed signs, we've got centre forward to go and sign, and that can get even messier.
I call this an opinion piece or whatever you want to in your terms, Chris. I ask everyone who comes on this show, it's like in terms of what's available in the market right now and the positions United need. So let's just say, for instance, we'll go full spine. Keeper, central defender, central midfielder and centre forward. From what's available out there, what quality of player do United need to bring to bridge that gap between City? Who would you get? Say you're playing Championships manager, for instance. You said that United should be in for this player. Who are them players for you? This is just your own opinion, mate. Don't worry, we're not going to put it out there and say United need to do this.
No, I think first off, I'll try and buy myself time by just going back to the point you made earlier, which was about Eric, and you can see the frustration, or why he would get frustrated, because he's a winner. You know, he's come in, he's proven this season after that horrific start, you know, that the work he's done, he's earned the right now to maybe kind of beat the table and say, come on, back me here, back me, you know. I need to close that gap, and time can be short for a coach in football. Things change very quickly, and you can't just write off seasons, and he needs to have that backing from the club. He needs to to get the players in, because he won't like seeing Pep and City win the treble. He won't like losing that final. He needs to see forward motion, and he needs to see how he can improve things and make strides. To come back to your point, how do you do that? That's why I fully understand the whole Harry Kane thing. You know, that to have a striker from day one who you know is going to be banging in goals, I think is just, it's huge.
Yeah. And
for me, I would like to have seen them, you know, go harder for Harry Kane. I would definitely like to have seen that. I think, you know, I just think to have, after a long time, you know, I mean, what are we talking? We're talking Van Persie, Rooney, for the last number 9, last great number 9. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, I can't think of one. You know, since everything feels like it's been a bit of a compromise. We've kind of put different options and stuff, and it's been too long for a club of this size to cut corners. So I think Kane's the one, absolutely. I think once you do, if you ever got Kane in place, I think so much of it kind of falls from there. I think you've got great players around him. But going back to the point, a defensive midfielder, I mean, obviously it'd been great to have got Jude Bellingham, but it wasn't going to happen. And it would be great to feel that you could still get Declan Rice. That's the kind of player. I don't see anybody out there that I'd probably rather have than him right now.
That's where I see it as a fan. You said it's like, I see Bellingham is elite, the next level is Rice, and United can get nowhere near either one of them, and that's why it is so depressing as a United fan right now. To the elite players are there, and they're 2 English players as well.
I know.
United, we're always top of the tree for the English players, and we can't get anywhere near them 2 players, and that's 1 and 2. And then you're talking the players below that then. So again, to me, for the size of the club, like you said, it looks like option 3.
Yeah.
That's how it looks to me. I don't know if you're the same there, but I'd agree to both of them players. To be honest, defence, I won't go into much detail. We talked about the goalkeeper and that, but if the option came for United just to go all out, full budget on 2 players, is that how you would go? Get the right quality over quantity?
Personally, yeah, I think there's been too much deadwood for too long. I think there's been too much mediocrity for too long. You know, it's a club that needs world-class players, not necessarily world stars. I'm not talking about world stars anymore. Yeah, Falcao and Schweinsteiger. No, I'm talking about world-class players like your Casemiros. You know, that kind of level. And I would rather see a couple, given what they've achieved this season, I would rather see a couple of world-class players come in and either keep what we have. You know, I don't think centre-backs are a major problem right now. I think we can get by there to a certain degree. So if we've got a striker and got a centre-mid, defence we can kind of live with. The keeper is a difficult one. As I say, that's thrown people because it looked for all the world like De Gea was going to re-sign. And then he wasn't. And that's changed things because, of course, a new keeper would be 40 to 50 million pounds, and that's, in the current climate, a big chunk out of the budget.
That's it. Couldn't have said it any better, mate. And it's been broken down well. Chris, absolute pleasure having you on. We've actually run out of time. That's flown by for an hour. Do check out Chris Wheeler on Twitter. What's your tag on Twitter, Chris, for
Chris
people?
Wheeler DM.
Yes. DM. We've reposted loads of Chris's stuff on the United Stand Twitter feed as well, so do check that out there. But guys, absolutely brilliant. Cheers for all your comments and everyone who's been in the chat, all your super chats as well, and new members, of course. Chris, thanks for coming on. We'll get you on again, and we'll see you on the tour, mate, no doubt.
We will. Yeah, look forward to it.
Brilliant stuff, guys. Cheers for tuning in. We'll be back later on with an update of everything. I think Mark is back later on tonight in the usual slot, so tune into that. I will see you through the week. Hopefully we've got more news to bring you, but stay tuned to the United Stand. Like, share and subscribe. We'll bring it all to you as it happens. Cheers for watching, everybody. We'll see you through the week.